So I want to thank everyone for being here today. I hope you're enjoying the conference. As we put together this panel, one of the things that we thought about was a question that is near and dear to my heart, which is, what does the future look like? And as I was discussing with my esteemed colleagues here, one of the things that is often asked of me when I travel the world is, what does the future of HR look like? And the reason for that is, quite simply, fear. When I think of this, I think of fear and what it is that we hear over and over again. We've seen over the course of the last 5 years or so this great rise in the movement to evolve HR. And many of the people who use this method of engaging the HR profession to evolve use technology as a lever to, or an instrument of HR's own demise in many cases. And we've seen at this conference that is really not the case. If anything, it is actually the lever for ensuring that HR is evolving. And so one of the things that we wanted to discuss here, and really something that we wanted to share with all of you, is our perspectives on where it is that HR technology is headed, but more importantly, what are the skills needed by the HR profession to ensure that we are evolving with the technologies, with the new movements that we are seeing. So, Ravi, I'll turn it over to you, and maybe you can share with us your perspective.
For me, it starts with an oxymoronic view of HR. The world is going more and more technology enabled, and HR and technology are something that has never worked very well together. We use technology to run what I call socialized processes, which are meant for masses and not for individuals and classes, and that's the process that we specialize in. To me, the perspective of the future of HR is, which I shared today morning, is the HR will become over a period of time invisible to an employee. It will not be present. It will be like a director who's not appearing in the movie, or maybe appearing in one scene like, you know, Hitchcock or Shyamalan or somebody like that. But the challenges I see is that the technologies or the skill set that are required, one, the core of technology, the knowledge of artificial intelligence or machine language or even analytics. HR is not a profession based out of statistics based, but analytics and X and Y. I see a huge challenge staring at the HR space. When we talk in the service industry, the automation is going to make a lot of current skill set redundant in the market. I'm seeing that a lot of today HR skill set are already redundant in the market, in the sense that there's no need for any more operations, and you are having digital assistants helping employees to do their own work, and the managers are doing their own HR management in a micro way and not following the corporate philosophy. You are having a concept called platforms coming into the organization, that every leader creates his own platform and tries to interact with them. And then more and more the technologies of corporate social networks and, you know, the WhatsApp groups of individual groups. So there are a lot of things that are happening in a company that is going outside the purview of the company, that is happening among the employees, but not in the radar of HR. So even the access to an email that used to happen is, email is no more the method of employees communicating with each other, or you know, the manager communicating with each other. So I see a huge challenge for HR to understand and become something like what happened in sales. Today you have a new generation of officers called chief digital officers, who are supposed to interact with customer. There's no more chief sales officers. That role is now taken over by what we call digital marketing officers, who are becoming globally a bigger role to interact with the customer. A similar trend will likely to happen in HR also. The traditional CHRO will be replaced by what I would call a chief digital HR officer or a chief technology officer, human beings, or, you know, whatever you call it. And that will be a major transformation that a lot of HR people today are not equipped to do it, because for them their knowledge of technology is, as on today, limited to a PPT or an Excel or a Word document, and that's where it stops. And somewhere they still think that HR is all about people connect. That means I go to the table and talk and then do emails and X and Y. And the new generation doesn't want you to connect with them, and they don't want to talk to you. Even if you go and say, hey, how are you? He says, I'm fine. And if you ask him next question, he says, whatever. And he walks away from that place. So there's going to be a huge challenge of newer technologies that already dominates the consumer mindset. My life today, my communication with my family today is all happening through newer technologies. But I think somewhere still the organization of HR believes that it happens in the traditional way.
Thank you, Ravi. Vikrant, what do you think?
Hi, everyone. And thanks, Alexander. So I would like to start with actually two riders. So we are here to crystal gaze about HR skills that would be required in future. And the first rider is that we can as crystal gaze as much as human beings are going to be employees in the organization. So that's the first thing. And with chatbots, with RPAs, with robos coming into work, we don't know till what time human beings would be employed. And at that time, probably human resources itself may not exist because they would be managing robos probably. And so we can crystal gaze only till that time. Had it been any other time in the past, probably I would have said that this may not happen in our lifetime. But with the speed with which disruptions are happening, probably it might just happen in our lifetime. So that's the first one. The second one, the second rider is, again, it's to do with the speed of disruptions. And we can imagine, and no matter how much crystal gazing we might do, I would be, with my limited intelligence, would be only doing a very linear job of crystal gazing, given whatever trends I have been seeing in the recent past. So imagine a situation, and this is something which is predicted. This is a research which says that by 2025, which is less than 10 years from now, an average worker would actually be working for more than 3 companies. Even if we were to take an average of 3 companies, imagine a situation that we as HR people are hiring this highly skilled employee. And he says that I actually am managing my entire salary, my personal details, my learning and development, my engagement, my health, etc., using this cloud-based HR system, right? So I have procured it, I use it, and I want all my salary details, all my engagement, all my learning and development related activities managed through that. But the employer organization doesn't actually use that. Now, how do you do? And imagine a workforce of, let's say, 50 people even, who are using 10 different systems. How do you integrate that? That's quite possible. But if we were to sit back and think right now, probably I'll be making a very linear kind of a job of doing crystal gazing. Now, with these two riders, let me first of all put forward one point. What I believe is that the HR skills in the future will actually lie outside of HR. So they will lie in IT, they will lie in marketing, they will lie in customer service, they would lie probably in engineering. And that's where I'll pick up from what Ravi said, that tomorrow, the job of an HR guy would not be the conventional HR, but it might be related to technology, it might be related to marketing, and marketing in the sense that you have just procured this very great learning management system, which brings in the world's best content over there, and now you have to market it because you have to ensure that the learners are using it. Now, are you doing an HR job over there, or are you doing a marketing job over there? We have been talking about design, right? And design obviously would be falling under engineering. So are you using any HR skills over there, or are you using engineering skills? So then what happens to the conventional, per se, HR knowledge and skills? So I see it much like hardware, software, and operating system. So the hardware actually is the core domain HR skills that we all talk about, whether it's recruitment, compensation benefits, labor laws, instructional design, blah, blah, blah. And as we all know, world over, the hardware is getting commoditized. And that probably, I feel, would happen in the case of HR also. So that becomes hygiene. Then there is a software. And the software part is actually all these skills that we are talking about, whether it's digital, whether it's business acumen, etc., etc. And then comes a very critical component of operating system, which is how do you go about doing that? And I believe that in HR, our operating systems would certainly need an upgrade and a reboot. And where I'm coming from is that in the last 5 years, the way technology has evolved in HR, we have been actually running around implementing, bringing in, or changing, or upgrading HR systems. And at that time, probably somewhere, because the focus and attention has gone over there, employees are coming back through their ESAT and other surveys saying, we need HR to have a human touch. Now, and it's important for HR to again regain and deliver that human touch. But the fact actually is that the way that human touch will be delivered, that process and that approach is going to change thanks to technology. So that's where the operating systems of HR will need an upgrade, because now you have to deliver what you are delivering using technology. So then the question is that what do I see as critical skills for HR in the future? Essentially 4 categories that I would put. So one is this entire piece around digital. And I would like to introduce a word which prevails, of course, is called virtuosity, which is the ability to be able to see things from a technology point of view, be able to conceptualize and deliver anything and everything using technology. So virtuosity, according to me, would be a very critical HR skill in the future. And combined with that is the second one, which is obviously data analytics, data interpretation. And I would foresee every good HR professional being actually a data scientist. So just a few days back, we were holding one session on data analytics in our organization. And actually, this gentleman who was talking about that, he mentioned that in tomorrow's world, you don't need to be a physicist to be a physicist. All actually you need to do is to be able to understand the basics of that particular process, and the rest you need to be a data scientist. And I was joking around with my colleagues that now I'm very sure, what do I want my child to do? All I want my child to do is to be a data scientist. And then she can be a doctor for 6 months. She can be a physicist for 2 years. She can be anything, just using data analytics and her capability to be able to interpret data, because that's where the world is headed to. So that's the second key thing. The third critical thing, which still remains, and I think the nature is going to change, is the entire piece around business and financial acumen, and which many a time our business leaders give a feedback that we don't know that. They can't have a business conversation with HR guys. A lot of times they complain. So that need still remains. But the dimension, the way I feel it's going to acquire is that do I have business and financial acumen of an entrepreneur? So can I have a conversation with my business leader to help him take decisions, human resources or manpower related decisions, using business as the perspective, and help him succeed in creating business success? So that's the third element. And I'll again come back to technology once again, because I believe that in technology, the HR person would be playing 3 roles. He would not just be a consumer, would not just be an implementer, but actually a creator. Because with the myriad kind of systems getting launched, the different apps happening, the appification, if I may say, of everything happening, somewhere the HR person will need to be an interpreter using the internal context and the knowledge of technology to be able to create a system or a technology solution which is tailor-made and delivers precisely to the unique needs of the organization at that point of a time. So somewhere, an HR person is also going to be an integrator of technology. So that's my perspective.
Thank you, Vikrant. Professor Prem?
Hi, Alexander. Hello, everyone. We have heard both Ravi and Vikrant eloquently giving their perspective on what is the future of HR, what kind of skills would be relevant in the future, literally crystal gazing. I'm coming from an academic background of HR and organizational behavior. So to me, HR is both the art and the science. And particularly when I look at the future of HR, while I do not want to be contradicting to the ideas expressed by the previous speakers, but I do believe the art where the heart is would continue to hold its relevance. I'm emphasizing this because when you look at the kind of competencies that are required, to me, those competencies are the core of an individual, which are those softer competencies. And I do believe if those softer competencies are in place, the individual would naturally be able to, naturally be inclined to have maybe that intellectual curiosity, if that is part of the softer elements of competencies. Individual would be able to acquire the kind of knowledge and skills that are required and that keep changing at a pretty fast pace. So therefore, today when you look at whether it is analytics or digital skills, I'm sure things would be easier for one to acquire and move forward if those fundamental softer competencies are in place. I would certainly tend to agree that one of those very important competencies would be relationship building, which might sound very conservative view of how HR is going to be, but I strongly believe these softer competencies would go a great deal in terms of ensuring successful HR in the future, as it has been so in terms of the past as well. Business knowledge or business acumen, whichever way we want to put it, is another important competency. So I talked about intellectual curiosity, business acumen, and relationship building as some of those competencies. There is nothing new in this. When you look at areas like analytics, I think one of the pitfalls, yes, it's very important. However, how HR has been using analytics, for instance. There is a kind of a overwhelming data inflow. Whether that is actually helping HR to truly address the business requirement is the question. So everybody is so passionately following data analytics, so much so that the real business issues not necessarily are getting solved using data analytics. The way one engages in data analytics itself seems to be the end by itself. Fine. So what I'm trying to say is that analytics seems to be more of an inside-out process for HR, when it should be actually an outside-in kind of a process. I remember reading somewhere someone coming with so much of enthusiasm and claiming that by using data analytics, the person was able to predict almost 70% of the variance of employee turnover. So somebody, and that's a real great amount of variance that is getting explained. 70% of a particular phenomenon getting explained. Fine, so that's simply amazing. Somebody asks, so how much of this you would be able to explain to us, predict the dysfunctional turnover? And the answer was, dysfunctional turnover in my organization is only 2%. So what does it say? It says the person has used data analytics to come to a conclusion on an issue which is not at all an issue for the organization. It's only 2% of the turnover that is really a problem for the, so in that sense, it is not a problem. Fine, so therefore, what I'm trying to say is that if you look at HR as an area from an academic perspective, it doesn't have a strong theoretical background. So in that sense, even after many decades, we are struggling to create HR or retain HR as a discipline in its true sense because it lacks a strong theoretical framework, unlike many of the other disciplines do. So many a time, therefore, the flavor of the month, flavor of the season, takes over HR and pulls it to a certain direction. So my idea of sharing this is to caution that we must not, or caution that we must focus more and more on solid evidence in terms of how HR contributes to business. What are those softer competencies that are needed for HR to deliver results, as opposed to going after the flavor of the month kind of a thing, and further taking away the HR and its existence. So what I would like to conclude this segment is by saying HR needs to be much more focused on evidence-based management. And that evidence-based management should be looking at what the business needs and then coming out with the solution, as opposed to what HR has access to and therefore trying to understand the phenomenon. So it is important for HR to focus on the research element, and this brings us to the next issue of the disconnect that is existing between the academia and the world of work. If you read many of the well-known articles that are published by practitioners, you would find it as one extreme, a truly crystal gazing kind of a phenomenon. And if you look at the articles written by researchers, the academic ones, you will find most of the practitioners find little relevance to those findings which are done by the academics. So to me, HR has to evolve as a discipline, and for that, we need a strong theoretical background. We need much more research, and the research which can be used by the practitioners, and the practitioner research need to be much more informed as opposed to the kind of surveys that we keep seeing, wherein even consulting outfits produce results under the garb of research and probably claim that these are significant research results. So to conclude, what I'm trying to say is that HR would continue to remain an art, and the scientific aspects which we are talking about now in terms of technology, in terms of social media, in terms of cloud, analytics, so on and so forth, certainly those are important, but to have the successful HR careers, what one needs is the hardcore soft competencies. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Prem. You know, it's interesting because each of you has highlighted a specific role that HR will play, whether it be integrator, whether it be someone who is kind of the hardcore interpreter of science to practice, or evidence-based manager. You mentioned an entrepreneurial perspective. I ask, in your mind, which one is the closest in terms of HR's ability to achieve that particular role? If you think about this, another way of looking at this is, where do you think the biggest gaps are? In other words, where is it that HR's skill set needs to be grown as quickly as possible to meet the evolutionary changes that we're seeing to this point?
Let me answer them through some of the examples I've seen
Sure.
in the real world. 2 years back, GE had invited some 30 CHROs to Crotonville to look at the future of the learning systems of the employees. And after 2 days of deliberation by the finest brains in the HR field, we realized and we came out with a solution which is very, very out of the box thinking. We said that we will use a concept called text analytics of what our employee does through writing mails or writing codes or even writing a memos or writing a Word document. If you analyze the text of an employee using a text analysis, you can gain a huge amount of a learning requirement for the business as well as for the individual. And then for the first time, GE said, let's pilot it. And we were part of the piloting process. And in 1 year's time, there are two distinct streams of learning system emerged. One is what is suitable for the business and for its customers, and that is purely gleaned from a text analytics robotics that, like a Google does a search and finds out what you like, what you dislike, and what you want to learn, and what you miss in your life, and it suggests you, why don't you buy this, and why don't you buy that, recommendation engine, and X and Y. It started creating a sort of a nano learning system for employees to learn in 5 minutes, 10 minutes, quick things that he is lacking. And when he's trying to do a job, it prompts him, tell him that I think you are going to do this job, would you like to learn a little bit more about before you employ the job? More interesting for me from the text analytics perspective was, it also came into the requirement of skills that are not needed by the organization, but they're needed by the individual for his life skill perspective. That means for his future enablement. A lot of time we train people for what we need for today. We don't train them for future. Even not current job, but future job. It may be in this company and may not be in this company. It may be his liking. After 20 years, he wants to become an environmentalist. After 30 years, he wants to become a social activist or X or Y, and he needs to acquire skills for it. So GE, for the first time, piloted a concept of knowing life skill learning processes. To me, that is how a HR will evolve. That text analytics will drive the learning system, and not a learning specialist will drive the learning system. Learning specialist will become a curator of what is needed and then providing the content for it, which means confluence of multiple people create a different culture, different art, different science, and X and Y. And one of the things that we piloted was Ask HR, because a lot of people ask questions to HR, and HR does not know the answer. Not the right HR may know the answer, but some other HR may know the answer, or somebody outside the HR may know the answer. It was very, very surprising. The number of questions started coming on that portal, and the ability of the HR to answer first time showed me as a leader, inability of my team to handle today questions of the employees. That again showed me another side of a thing that I have to use what I call a community of learners and teachers rather than any specialist. So the concept of an SME, even in HR, will vanish. That means every manager or every employee will do his own HR. The third example that came to me very recently, which I am working with a product company, is My Google. Because we are all accustomed to Google being a search engine for everyone. Excellent. 6 months back, Sundar Pichai wheeled a concept called My Google. That means there is a Google for me only. That will not be like yours or him or any one of your Google. So that Google will be customized for me and everything is for me. I think that is what the world is going to. An employee would like to have my job, my career, my life, and the company is part of a platform for him to use to proceed in that journey. It is not the end of it. I'm not marrying a company. I'm only pursuing a company for my own objective, my own platform, my own requirement, which is larger than the work as a concept. And how do I enable HR as a platform enabler? And the fourth example, which I gave it in the morning, is very true. Why I said invisible HR, and there is an example for it. Even if I spend $10,000 in Amazon, Jeff Booth is not going to call me and have dinner on wine with me. Or no customer guy from Amazon is going to call and say, Mr. Ravi Shankar, we are happy that you are spending so much of money. I love Amazon. I use Uber day in and day out. I don't know who are the sales guy. I don't know who are the CEOs. So the entire sales organization, which is supposed to interact with me, and that's what I was taught in my MBA school, Customer is all about relationship management, understanding the psyche of the customer, wining and dining with the customer, giving gift to the customer. In today's world, it has vanished. 90% of my consumption, I don't know who the company is, and nobody talks to me. And I have no idea who the hell is the sales guy or a relationship manager or a service representative. Everything is a chat. If I have a problem with Uber, I open the app, put a problem, and somebody replies to me, doesn't even call me and tell me that you have a problem. I say somebody cheated me, a driver cheated me, he returns the money. So the entire function called customer relationship management, sales, marketing, to me as a customer has suddenly become invisible in my lifestyle. That's what I'm predicting will happen in future also. Be it you call it an art, be it you call it a science. When Google wrote a book, is the CHRO wrote a book 5 years back, saying all policy decisions of human related are taken by analytics, I was stunned. So I personally connected with him and asked him a question, how he does it. And some of the things he told me was phenomenally insightful, like Netflix knows what I like to watch. So it delivers that content to me. And he says that's what Google does to its employee. We like to do what we call a reference manual, and that reference manual serves to you as an HR services to you as an individual. It is not a common HR for every Google employee. It's an individual HR for every employee. To me, that's where the world is going.
Okay. Vikrant? Prem?
Well, I would continue to bet on technology. And the reason is primarily two, actually. So one is that right now, the cheese of HR is actually not being moved by HR or HR guys. It is actually being moved by people who have nothing to do with HR and the employees. And let me try and explain how. Till some time back, the changes that were brought about in HR were by HR people. So they could be researchers outside who came up with a new research, a new psychometric tool, a new way of doing things, etc. Or there could be HR consultants. But now, the cheese of HR is being moved by somebody who decided to start a health app primarily for B2C customers, sell it through the Play Store, and suddenly one day decided that this could be actually a very good B2B model as well to create health and wellness in the organizations and also employee engagement. That person has nothing to do with HR. So the HR cheese is being moved by people who are not related to HR. And as a result of that, HR wields much lesser control over that ecosystem. And the second set of people who are moving the cheese of HR are the employees themselves. So I remember two examples. So one is one employee, and I met him in the guest house over breakfast table, and I was generally chatting, and I always knew that this person is very high on learning. And I just asked him, I said, so how do you learn and how do you keep abreast with things? And he told me about 8 certifications which he had done on his own. He himself identified, he never came to learning and development to say, I want to be certified in these areas, please identify a certification for me. He identified from his own sources, did his own research, paid his own money, and did those certifications, and I in learning and development wasn't even aware. So by the stroke of luck that we were both together on a breakfast table, and I just decided to pick up that conversation, that I came to know. And this is happening right there. I won't name, of course you would be aware, they are selling learning programs on the net just like cheese or just like cakes, giving discounts for limited period. And we all know, because it is right up there. You open Facebook, their advertisement is there. You open NDTV, their advertisement is there. It's right there in your face. And where is the L&D person coming over there? There's nowhere there. So the employee is actually right now hobnobbing, if I may say, without any information to HR or L&D in building the skills. So that's the first critical thing. The second critical thing, why I would still bet on technology and why HR needs to really get on top of that is because of this disruption, the way, it's not just the way the service is getting delivered to employees which is changing, actually what you are delivering itself is changing. So till some time back, rewards and recognitions used to be those physical parties. Now reward and recognition is actually appified. So you have a whole host of apps. You can actually decide to buy one and give away various reward vouchers to people. So the reward and recognition process or the reward and recognition in itself has changed, and so is the role of HR. So I remember one classic case where an L&D person in one of the previous organizations came across a vendor presentation of a phenomenally good, very under quotes, the four-letter word starts with S, ends with Y. Obviously, I won't be able to utter the full of it. Great state-of-the-art system. Got really excited. And as an HR and L&D professional, identified that this is the right thing that the organization needs. Did the whole due diligence, created a note for approval, got it approved by the HR head, went to supply chain and to finance and said, I want to buy this. Finance and supply chain said, it's a very high value deal. So where are the other 3 or 5 comparative proposals? And we can't just let you buy this thing right now. Says, okay, fine, let me just figure out. So just for the sake of doing the paperwork, identified 2 or 3 other comparable products or what he thought were comparable, did a comparative study, and obviously to show that still product is the best, went over there. Supply chain and finance got into the act, met all the partners, and suddenly said, no, that's not the best, this is the best. And all the cross questions regarding the value which they asked, this person was not able to deliver the right responses. And after 6 months of effort, what they actually found was that there is a totally different system which is coming into the organization. And when it was launched, the entire HR community said, hey, but hold on, this is just another LMS. What about that great academy that you had shown? This is just another LMS, and we already have one. So why did you buy this? And that was a classic disaster. So that's where this critical component around the technological acumen comes in. Because one, the cheese of HR is not being moved by HR guys, but by somebody else. And second, what you are delivering as HR people in itself is changing or has changed already.
Vikrant, that's an excellent example. It's one thing that stands out to me is specifically the DNA of HR in many cases has been not to pilot or not to take the authority or take the reins and lead the specific endeavor, lead the opportunity to try new things and rely heavily on others to provide the acumen on when they're thinking about that. I wonder if, Professor Prem, maybe you can speak to when you were talking about the DNA of HR and its transactional nature in its inception.
See, the point I would like to make here is that if you look at the future skills, certainly technology related would definitely be an important one. But as someone said, it's always that 20-60-20 principle, which means 20% of the people have got it in HR, 60% of the people will get it, and 20% will never get it. So therefore, it is just a matter of time. So 80% of HR folks would get it, the technological skill, capabilities, etc. But then even when you have those capabilities, fine, they find it is less than 10% of the HR folks have the business acumen. So I once again want to reiterate my earlier point that yes, you would be able to get on with acquiring this technology related skill, but unless and until, once again, the fundamentals are in place, fine, like business acumen, Because HR, by and large, is sort of disappointing in terms of its capability related to understanding business or knowing the business goal or the financial perspective, so on and so forth. So that would convert the technology knowledge to actual advantage, and which is an area that is really showing up as a gap area.
You've shared some important insights here with us today. I want to take the opportunity to maybe open the floor to some questions from the audience. I think there's so much that we can learn from the examples that you've shared, so I'd encourage the audience to maybe ask some questions.
Hi everyone, and thank you for your insights. My name is Sandhya. My question is that while we know that technology is very important for us to harp upon, then while Mr. Ravishankar has mentioned that HR is going to be invisible, while we get along and continue to learn technology and we also understand the HR is becoming invisible, how is that important, or how is that easy or difficult for us to maintain the human touch of the HR? Because even in the previous session, we've seen that everybody felt that personal experience is something that the employees value most. So how is that HR can give that personal touch to the employees, being invisible?
That's the argument I've heard a lot of times, not today, for the last 15 years. But I'm seeing a trend in the world that is becoming irrelevant even at a family level. What we call a personal touch is getting enabled through a technological touch. I still vividly remember my daughter when she went abroad 10 years back. I told her one condition on which you will go, that every day you will send a mail about your well-being and blah, 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 blah. And after 1 week, I was getting angry. She was not fulfilling that obligation. And I started shouting at her. She said, listen, I will, on a condition, accept you as a friend in my Facebook. You will know everything about my life. But you lose 2 rights as a father. One, you will not comment on my page, because that will cheese off my friends. They will stop looking at my page. And number 2, you will not comment about morality of what I do. If you are ready to do that, come in. You will know every time what I do in my life, including the boyfriends I acquire and X and Y. I said, wow, that's a very bold statement, but everyone gets curious about somebody's personal life, whether it's yours or someone else. I said, welcome to the world, and I'm obeying that for last 10 years. Every day morning when I open the Facebook, I know what she has done in the last 24 hours, and I'm in touch with her. Touch is a mental framework. It's not a physical framework of a touch. I believe that she's sharing things that I need to know about her as a father and as a well-being. That's what will happen. I told you about an Amazon experience or an Uber experience. I am, as a customer, is pampered by Amazon. I don't need a physical touch of an Amazon. I don't want Jeff Bezos to come to my house. I don't want him at all. But as long as I'm ready to buy the goods and he's ready to get a return quietly and give me the money back if I don't like the goods, I love him. Why should I bother about my talking to anyone in Amazon? So I'm saying the world of human touch itself is undergoing a dramatic change. You will look at the way I interacted with my father is actually less when I didn't have a cell phone and I didn't have anything else. But the way I interact with my kids today is 100 times more than what I interacted with my father because of the technology enablement. And that is what is the touch all about. So I'm saying touch is not going in front of a person and talking about it, but being in touch with an employee using a technology in whatever way you say. When a telephone was invented, people said you have to talk physically face to face. Today, 90% of the world talks through telephone. Nobody talks face to face. And then again, we went into chat and mails and X and Y's. To me, human touch will vanish like a customer touch has vanished from the thing. And I love it basically because they are actually in touch with me more. Uber knows more about me and my driving habits. I mean, it can lead to some privacy issues. I don't know whether you know about a famous case where one lady filed a divorce case in California, finding out the Uber tracking of her husband because he left the cell phone at home. He found out the trip he took, and he found out that what he was telling about where he went and what the trips he took were not matching. So those are the dangers of any technology. But I'm saying yes, but I've been traveling for the last 7 days, and I'm in touch with my wife more than what I would have been otherwise in the good old days without a technology. So I don't think HR being in touch with employee, and today employee size of 30,000, 40,000. Let me give another example. I'm an HR advisor to a startup. There is no HR manager. I'm only an advisor. And I asked the CEO, why are not employing a BU HR, or what do you call it, typical HR? He said, I don't need it, because my entire team knows how to hire their own people. So everyone does their LinkedIn and hire their own team. I said, what about the salary? He says, if I'm a technologist, I know what are worth paying. I don't need HR to come and tell me what is worth paying. I will pay whatever I think is worth paying. So he has removed a recruitment from his company. He has removed CNB from his company. And he is only keeping me because I think temporarily he feels guilty not having an HR. and the number of mails I get from him in a month is hardly one day. And I'm one day hoping that he'll send a mail saying your contract is also closed, we don't need you anymore. So that is what the world is going to. So I don't believe touch is anymore required in the traditional sense of a touch.
It's interesting. I have 3 daughters, and I can assure you that human touch is definitely going away, or at least changing. None of them want anything to do with me, even on Facebook. So you're lucky. You have a daughter. Yeah.
Because of the agreement I have.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I thank you all for addressing this interesting topic. Thank you so much.